The Curse and Secrets of Tutankhamun, Inbreeding and Debauchery. In the annals of ancient history, few names evoke as much intrigue and fascination as that of Tutankhamun, the young pharaoh of Egypt. His tomb unveiled a treasure trove of artifacts that offered a rare glimpse into the world of ancient Egypt. However, beyond the material treasures that lay in his tomb, what truly captured the world's imagination was the legend surrounding Tutankhamun, that of the cursed pharaoh. Tutankhamun, whose original name in ancient Egyptian was Tutankhaton, was one of the most enigmatic and famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt. He was born around 1341 BC and ascended to the throne at a very young age, approximately 9 years old. His reign, which is estimated to have lasted about 9 years, was relatively brief, but his historical importance and legacy endure to this day. Welcome to the Diary of History. One of the reasons Tutankhamun is so well known is due to the discovery of his tomb in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. The tomb, which was in an amazing state of preservation, housed a wealth of treasures and funerary objects that provided invaluable insight into the life, religion, and culture of ancient Egypt. His accession to the throne marked the decline of the ambitious political and cultural project of his father, Akhenaten, who had undertaken a bold reform of power, centering the cult on a single deity, Aten, represented as the solar disk. This transformation had especially affected the powerful priestly structure of Thebes, which venerated Ammonius. The stele of the restoration of Tutankhamun reflects a settling of scores by the local elite, who took advantage of the young age of the young pharaoh to carry out a counterattack. In his brief reign, Tutankhamun became a symbol of a return to the religious and cultural traditions that predated his father's reforms. Under his leadership, the cults of the traditional gods, including Ammonius, were restored and many of Akhenaten's religious and artistic policies were reversed. This political and religious turn also had an impact on diplomatic relations with other nations and neighboring states, which had been disrupted during Akhenaten's reign. Despite ascending the throne as pharaoh at the early age of 9, it is believed that during the early years of his reign, true control rested in the hands of Ai, backed by the influential military commander Horemheb. Throughout his reign of approximately 10 years, Tutankhamun failed to accomplish great feats, but he did undertake important measures to restore the ancient religious orders that had been neglected under the rule of his father, Akhenaten. This restoration involved the resumption of the worship of the traditional gods, including Ammonius, with the aim of restoring religious stability in Egypt. In addition to his focus on religion, the young King Tut also strove to improve relations with neighboring kingdoms. This diplomacy helped to maintain peace and stability in the region, which was essential for Egypt's prosperity. Tutankhamun's reign, despite its brevity, had a significant impact on the restoration of traditions and diplomacy in ancient Egypt. Although his legacy is often overshadowed by the wealth of his tomb, his role in Egyptian history should not be underestimated, as he contributed to stability and cultural restoration at a crucial time in ancient Egyptian civilization. Tutankhamun's regency left a lasting imprint on Egyptian history, marking an important period of transition and cultural restoration that influenced Egyptian civilization for centuries. His legacy continues to be the subject of study and admiration, revealing the complexity of the pharaonic dynasties and their influence on world history. The exact cause of his death remains a mystery, and various theories have been proposed, such as disease, infection, or even possible assassination. Research continues to unravel the enigmas surrounding his untimely demise. The young pharaoh had several medical conditions, such as a foot deformity, which may have made him more susceptible to infection. It has been suggested that a leg fracture may also have contributed to his death, as it could have become infected. One of the most controversial theories suggests that Tutankhamun may have been murdered. This idea is supported by various evidence, such as the presence of a fragment of damaged cranial bone, which some researchers believe may have been caused by a blow to the head. In addition, traces of toxic substances, such as arsenic, have been found in his body. Some argue that this evidence could indicate a plot to eliminate him and take the throne. Inbreeding in Egyptian royalty, which resulted in marriages between close relatives, has led to the theory that hereditary medical complications could have played a role in Tutankhamun's death. This would include genetic diseases or congenital malformations that could have affected his health and contributed to his early death. On the other hand, the possibility has been raised that Tutankhamun suffered from malaria, a mosquito-borne disease that was common in ancient Egypt. Traces of malaria parasites have been found in samples of his DNA, suggesting that he may have been infected. There are two interesting hypotheses about the construction of his tomb. One suggests that it was erected in haste due to Tutankhamun's sudden and unexpected death, which would explain its apparent simplicity compared to other royal tombs. The other theory points to the fact that the tomb was originally intended for another person, which could explain some anomalies in its design and contents. However, paradoxically, Tutankhamun's lack of notoriety during his lifetime was a determining factor in the preservation of his tomb. By falling into oblivion after his death, his tomb went unnoticed by looters and tomb robbers, which allowed it to reach our days practically intact. Although Tutankhamun did not enjoy great fame during his lifetime, the same cannot be said of his progenitor. Akhenaten is undoubtedly one of the most controversial pharaohs in the entire history of ancient Egypt. He belongs to the intriguing Amarna period, a period characterized by exceptional and peculiar events. This pharaoh, united in marriage to the beautiful Nefertiti, was not only notable for being the only ruler in a span of 3,000 years to undertake a radical religious reform, but also became the first recorded historical figure to do so. His reform introduced a monotheistic religion that promoted the exclusive worship of the Aten, perhaps with the purpose of centralizing power around his own figure. On the walls of Akhenaten's tomb, the intimate drama of his family is engraved, an account that reveals the complex web of emotions in Egyptian royalty. Despite the damage they have suffered over time, we can still discern a scene of deep mourning. In it, the parents, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, are presented in a heartbreaking act of mourning. The cause of their grief, the loss of one of their daughters. This portrayal of royalty weeping in public is completely unusual in Egyptian history, where royal families rarely showed their emotions so openly. However, the tragic losses in Akhenaten's royal family were not limited to a single daughter. Evidence suggests that more than one of his descendants fell victim to an epidemic, possibly the plague, which was sweeping the country at the time. This disease, with the capacity to decimate up to 40% of the population, was perceived as a divine calamity, and the pharaoh was held personally responsible by his people. As tragedy befell his reign, Akhenaten also lost his constant companion, Queen Nefertiti. The splendor of his empire was beginning to falter, and his advisors surely saw him as a dangerous liability. The country was losing its wealth and power, and Akhenaten's project seemed to be crumbling. Finally, 13 years after the founding of his city in his reign, Akhenaten passed away. Some argue that his death may have been the result of a plot to end his reign. The city he had created was abandoned and, in time, systematically destroyed, along with the cult of Aten and the very memory of Akhenaten, relegated to obscurity. His legacy, however, persists in the mysteries of his reign and in the shadow of his successor, the enigmatic Tutankhamun, who was perhaps the fruit of another of his unions with the enigmatic Kia. Tutankhamun's wife was Ankhesenamun, an intriguing figure in the history of ancient Egypt. Ankhesenamun was the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, making her Tutankhamun's half-sister. Her marriage to Tutankhamun took place when she was about 13 or 14 years old, shortly after he ascended to the throne. Such a liaison was common among Egyptian royalty, as they sought to maintain the purity of the royal line. The relationship between Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun has been the subject of speculation and study. It is known that she called him "my husband, my lord," in the letters that have been preserved, suggesting a close relationship. It is also interesting to note that in some inscriptions, Ankhesenamun mentions that she had no children with Tutankhamun, which has led to theories about possible fertility problems or illnesses that could have affected the couple's offspring. The story of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun is a fascinating chapter in the history of ancient Egypt, full of mysteries and enigmas that continue to intrigue Egyptologists and those attracted to the rich culture of this ancient civilization. The Golden Mask of Tutankhamun is one of the most dazzling finds of ancient Egyptian civilization. This magnificent work of art is crafted from no less than 22 pounds of pure gold, making it a priceless piece of both historical and aesthetic value. The Mask of Tutankhamun is on display at the renowned Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This dazzling mask is not only a treasure in itself, but also serves as an iconic symbol of the grandeur and splendor of ancient Egyptian culture. The detail and artistry with which it was created reveal the artistic skill of the time and the deep respect the Egyptians had for their pharaohs. In its current home at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the mask continues to captivate visitors from around the world, transporting them to a time when wealth and religion were intertwined in a society that revered its rulers as living gods. The Mask of Tutankhamun is a tangible testament to the fascinating history of ancient Egypt and a window into the amazing legacy this civilization left behind for the modern world. According to a report by Science Alert, during the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, it was discovered that the young pharaoh wore a necklace made from flour. Surprisingly, these flowers were in an excellent state of preservation because they were sealed inside the coffin next to him. Although funeral bouquets have been found in other Egyptian mummies, Tutankhamun's tomb is the only royal burial where all the flowers have been found in their original state, just as they were left by the ancient Egyptian mourners. Detailed studies of the flowers and fruits used in the making of the necklace have provided valuable chronological information. It has been determined that Tutankhamun was buried approximately between mid-March and the end of April. This data suggests that his death probably occurred during the winter season. And most intriguing is that, according to experts, the preparation of his body for burial would have required about 70 days. This leads to the conclusion that Tutankhamun died at a time of year that contrasts with the period of his burial, adding an additional enigma to the chronology of his life and death. The mysteries surrounding Tutankhamun's story continue to intrigue scholars and allow us to shed light on hitherto unknown aspects of life in ancient Egypt, and this gave rise to the famous myth of the curse. The supposed Curse of Tutankhamun is a legend that originated around the discovery of his grave by archaeologist Howard Carter. The curse was largely popularized by the tabloid press of the time and became a part of popular culture. The curse was said to affect those who had desecrated the tomb or were associated with its opening, including Howard Carter and his team. Cases of illness, accidents and deaths were reported among those who had been present during the opening of the grave. On the other side, there is a fact that is not widely known, and that is that Tutankhamun's tomb holds even more amazing secrets. In a study published in 2011, it was revealed that next to the young pharaoh's body rested two mummified female fetuses. This discovery added an intriguing chapter to the already enigmatic story of Tutankhamun. One of the fetuses was approximately 5 to 6 months gestation, while the other was close to 9 months of development and, unfortunately, had died at or around the time of her birth. The presence of mummified fetuses in a royal tomb is extremely rare in ancient Egypt, making this find exceptional. Also, the ancient Egyptians did mummify some children, but this practice was quite atypical compared to the mummification of adults. The reasons behind the presence of these fetuses in Tutankhamun's tomb remain a mystery. The Tutankhamun's treasure is a legacy of immense value that was unveiled in one of the most remarkable archaeological finds of all time. When the tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun was opened in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, a treasure that had remained hidden for more than 3,000 years was revealed. This treasure comprised an astonishing array of objects and artifacts that offered a unique insight into the culture and wealth of ancient Egypt. Along with these jewels, a wide variety of ritual and religious objects were discovered, intended to accompany Tutankhamun on his journey to the afterlife. These pieces included statues, figures of deities and utensils used in the worship of the Egyptian gods. The treasure also contained Tutankhamun's personal items, including weapons such as shields, bows and arrows, as well as clothing and footwear that the young pharaoh would have worn during his lifetime. In addition, The walls of the tomb were adorned with wall paintings depicting scenes from Tutankhamun's life and death, as well as aspects of daily life in ancient Egypt. This extraordinary treasure not only dazzled the world with its beauty and splendor, but also provided a unique insight into culture, religion and daily life in ancient Egypt, and remains an invaluable legacy of human history.